Hi, my name is Dr. Tom Hennifer and welcome to another exciting class presented by me. Now, in the next few weeks, we will be exploring the information contained in both your textbook and in the course syllabus. So it's important to review both items well before the class begins, not the night before. For those wishing to contact me directly, the best way is through the university email system. Since, well, I work in a classified building and cannot bring any personal items into my workplace, including smartphones. And as you can well expect, I'm not allowed to access external email due to the security threat that it can present. That said, just use the contact information located under my profile on the website, and that should make any email you want to send me totally accessible, regardless of where I am and regardless of what I'm doing that week. Now, since I can only be contacted via email, my office hours will be limited to 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, Monday through Friday, Central Standard Time. Now, a lot of students will say, how do I succeed in an online class? Now, let's look at this. Most students in this class are working adults and may have been out of mainstream academics for a while. So here are some tips I have observed over the last 15 years as a professor that will help you succeed in an online academic community regardless of how long you've been out of school. And if you follow these guidelines, you stand a better chance of succeeding in this course than if you just try to wing it. Procrastination. Procrastination is my greatest sin. It brings me so much sorrow. I'll have to remedy that sin. In fact, I'll start tomorrow. Always work ahead of yourself, especially when it comes to written assignments. Now, life, as we know, has a really bad habit of surprising us when we least expect it. So while procrastination seems to be a great alternative to writing an 8 to 10 page paper on a sunny day or spring day, by the lake or the beach, if the assignment is put off, experience shows that will be exactly the time when your internet connection, the power in your house, or even your computer will let you down. It's happened to me more times than I'd like to think about. Now, consider each class assignment as if it's a major project at the place you work. And ask yourself, would you procrastinate and turn the project into your boss 2 weeks after it was due? Probably not. And if not, then treat this class as if it's your top priority. And you should do fine. Now, remember that academic work is not just getting your ticket stamped so you can move on to the next interesting class, though we've all been there. It is, in actuality, a way to prove to the world you have the critical thinking skills that make you valuable not only to your current organization, but any organization you may work for in the future. Plan for the unexpected. Hey, life happens, things happen, friends get sick or people die, which is tragic. But then again, life also moves on. Now, one thing I've observed is all too often with the death of a family member, some students will put their entire life on hold and a sudden stop. And then they go back and try to make up 2 to 3 weeks worth of work after the due dates. And take it from somebody who knows. It's better to make considerations now than try and complete makeup work on top of regular assignments, which is in most cases nearly impossible to do. Online academics is about making adjustments. So here's an example. When my father-in-law was in the hospital, 5 states away, and we all knew he was going to die, I made sure that I could access the hospital's internet, so when we all sat around the room talking and telling war stories and saying goodbye, I was still able to keep working while staying close to my father-in-law, as close as possible. Now, every class is unique. There is some leeway when it comes to personal tragedy or acts of nature, so just contact me by email and we most likely will be able to work things out as they move along. Here's my favorite statement. But Dr. Tom, I've always been an A student. Well, hey, everyone is special, or our mothers wouldn't have told us that we were special. But when it comes to academic work, the professor is the last court of appeal when it comes to determining what grade an assignment should or should not receive. Now, what will happen a lot of times is students will appeal to their academic advisor or the dean, and it probably seems like a good idea, especially if a student thinks that a C- paper should really be an A- paper. But remember, it doesn't always work that way. So here's an example. A student wasn't happy with a grade they received on a paper, and they went to the dean of the department, even though the professor they had for that class had discussed the rubric and the assignment expectations with that student several times. Now, the student was sure that the professor was wrong and that that C- paper was, well, in reality, a B- paper. Unfortunately for the student, the dean read the paper and stated that the professor was overly gracious and gave the student an F on the paper. And, well, the dean's decision is final, even if the original professor objected and wanted to talk the dean into a better grade. So while we all have been A students at some point, remember, every class is different. And we all have that one class where we just, well, we don't relate to the material. Personally, mine was graduate accounting. And for my wife, it was music appreciation. Even though we both eventually graduated as magna cum laude. Have a plan B, C, D, E, and F. When advising students, I always tell them, have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D, because what we plan for may not always happen. As an example, anyone who has lived for any time in the Midwest knows about storms, especially tornadoes. So when I lose power or my internet connection goes down, I generally pick up my laptop and head off to the local McDonald's because they have free Wi-Fi and, well, $1 coffee. One semester during tornado season, I was there so often the manager of the local McDonald's walked over and asked me if I was looking for a job. Of course, I had to tell him why I was there. In another class, and this is great, I had a student who became homeless and unemployed the first week of class, but they did all of their classwork at McDonald's and still finished the course with an A. So remember, where there's a will, there is a way. Extra credit. Now, this is a really easy question for me to answer on extra credit because, well, in reality, there isn't any extra credit. Now, in my physical classes, the only time I award extra credit is when a student has completed all of their coursework to date and has a grade in the class, well, just slightly north of a B+. So it's a pretty good justification. Now, when this happens, I allow that student to do an extra credit project, and it's usually an 8-page paper. And I give them the extra push to get over the edge into the A category because they've demonstrated they can do the coursework. Now, because they've previously demonstrated their ability to do superior work, it all comes down to, well, maybe they didn't do well on a quiz or an exam. So I take this into consideration if they already have a grade of B+ before the end of the course. And sometimes that makes or breaks their GPA. Now, remember, students with a grade less than a B+ are not offered extra credit. Late work. This is an easy response, and the easy response is, well, just turn things in on time, which means the day before and not the day the assignment is due. Just in case the dog really does eat your hard drive. But hey, things happen. If an assignment is going to be late because of an unforeseen circumstance, such as, well, death in the immediate family, natural disaster, or your own personal death, now I require 2 weeks notice on that and a doctor's note, then reasonable accommodations are always made. And of course, these accommodations are at the discretion of the professor. But remember, vacation travel, time-consuming new assignments at work, a hectic personal life, or my personal favorite, a 10-day luxury trip to the Bahamas on a cruise ship that didn't have internet connection, well, that doesn't really count as a valid reason to receive an extension, so plan ahead. Now, remember, a hospitalized family member, on the other hand, well, that's a pretty valid excuse or justification for an extension. Military activation or deployment. Well, as somebody with prior service, I can tell you, one option anyone in the military doesn't have is the option to refuse a legal order, especially for deployment or annual training, what they call in the military AT. In those situations, assignments and deadlines can be modified, and I've done that so in the past. As an example, when a soldier was deployed 2 weeks into the start of a new class, she sent me a copy of her movement orders and we made adjustments until she was in process at her new forward operating base, or FOB, which in this case happened to be in Afghanistan. And like the song says, we're thankful for those thankful for the things they've done. So if you're in the military, let me know because, well, stuff happens. Everyone is busy. Doesn't matter who you are. Now, taking an online class is different than taking a physical class since, well, no one is there to make you stop playing Halo or updating your Facebook page and actually make you do your homework. Now, since many in class have careers and family and, well, other responsibilities, success in an online class comes from making the class a priority, even if that means putting other projects and priorities on the back burner, well, at least for a while. Here's a personal example. While working on my dissertation for my PhD, I placed a note on my office door for all my children, and it simply said, unless you, a sibling, the dog, or the house is literally on fire, don't even think of knocking on this door. Now, this sounds a little bit draconian and good, but good academic work comes from discipline, dedication, or commitment, sometimes at the expense of almost everything else. Learn to write gooder than the other guy. Actually, learn to write well. College writing is not like the writing we did in high school or in business. Academic writing is demanding, and it takes time to collect the research that will be used in a paper, pound out a rough first or second draft, proofread that draft, and produce a quality academic paper. It's a skill, it takes effort. That said, have someone read your paper for you, or we'll read it out loud to yourself. This is how most mistakes are found, because what sounds good or great or even correct in our head doesn't always read so well when someone else reads our paper back to us. Personally, my wife has read every paper I've ever written for college. Also, take advantage of the writing resources the university provides, which will take a lot of the fear and loathing out of written assignments. And, well, it's part of your tuition, so why not use it? Now, in this class, we will be using APA formatting, which is different from the MLA most people learned in high school. So now is the time to know the difference. And I speak from experience, since I learned MLA and then had to jump over and learn APA. Now, every formal paper you write in this class needs at least one unique academic APA formatted supporting citation or reference outside of the textbook. That's for each statement or paragraph showing how the supporting information you are writing about is supported by other academic writing. And this is how you gain the most points in the class. All sources should come from peer-reviewed journals or published papers such as, well, for an example, the New England Journal of Medicine, British Lancet, or my personal favorite, the Army Journal, Parameters. Now remember, sources from newspapers, and that includes the Wall Street Journal or Forbes, are not really considered academic in nature, since journalists are not required to disclose their sources. So if they don't disclose their sources, how can we check to see if the article has academic credibility, or if the information in there is just the opinions of the journalist? It's also important to consider that 90% of all information found on the internet is literally unusable for use in college work and college papers. And so consider using sources such as Google Scholar rather than just Google. Or better yet, use the university library. And if you're not sure if the article you found is unusable, just ask the librarian. They'll be more than happy to help you. So here's the rule I use when defining if a source is usable or not. If the paper is older than 5 years and doesn't have a date of publication, or the author doesn't have a PhD after their name, just move on to a better source. Now, let's talk about rubrics versus instructor analysis. Sometimes the rubric score on a paper will be different than the actual paper score you see on the system. So here are some thoughts. The rubric score is static, and the actual paper analysis and comments in the paper by me are much more dynamic, which is why there could be a difference between the rubric score and my evaluation of the paper. So when you get your paper back, look at the actual paper, and you will see my observations, which are not usually included in the rubric scoring. Now, professors are allowed to adjust a rubric score if the rubric score is too high, or in some cases, too low, depending on the quality of the written assignment, since they are using their years of experience in the evaluation of papers and not just a rubric scoring algorithm to give you a grade. As an example, and this happened just about a week ago. As an example, the rubric recently scored a student's paper as a B+. And well, personally, I thought the work was an A paper. So I changed the score to reflect that analysis. Oddly enough, the student didn't complain when I changed the rubric score from 9 out of 11 to 11 out of 11 because I thought it was a better paper. Also consider that unlike true-false tests, where 9 out of 10 correct answers is always 90%, written assignments are based not just on the rubric, but how the data is presented in written form. And if that student just did what was minimally required, or if they made a demonstrated effort to add to the body of knowledge on the assignment and went above and beyond the basic requirements and explored new concepts, even if they contradict the book. And yes, you are allowed to contradict the book. Now, this class is where your written work is evaluated, but it is not a class on how to write a paper. A writing class is where a student's ability to write is developed over time, and a student is given several chances to improve a paper before the instructor gives it a final grade. This class is different. This class is where a paper is only submitted when the student, not you, thinks it's ready to be graded. And by the way, there are no do-overs, so don't post your paper till you're ready to have it graded. At this academic level, it's expected that all students possess skills necessary to write at this higher academic level, which will include many of the following. Number 1, the student knows how to format a paper in MS Word using headers, footers, and other formatting elements. Number 2, the student knows how to write in third person and not first person, and that's really critical. Number 3, what is a peer review or academic journal source rather than a journalistic source such as the Wall Street Journal or Forbes magazine, and don't ever use the Huffington Post. Number 4, does the student know the difference between a direct quote, a block quote, and how to use APA formatting standards, which are very much different than MLA? So that's it for this section, and there will be additional videos as we progress through this course. And take a deep breath and sit back and relax. We're going to have a good time.